In more than 2 decades of combat after September 11, which American helicopter had the most dangerous cockpit? Not the Apache, not the Black Hawk. Something smaller, cheaper, and never designed to be in the fight at all. The OH-58D Kiowa Warrior is a single-engine Scout derived from a civilian airframe, with no cockpit armor, built around one Cold War assumption: find the enemy, and then hand the fight to someone else. That assumption collapsed in 2003. Over Baghdad and Kandahar, the Kiowa became the United States Army's default gunship, flying 70 to 80 combat hours per aircraft per month at rooftop altitude, well inside the range of small arms fire. A platform designed to watch, pressed into a war that demanded it fight. As one replacement program after another was launched and cancelled, the Kiowa stayed. Was the Kiowa the best tool available, or simply the only tool the United States Army could afford to keep flying? The OH-58D Kiowa Warrior began life far from the battlefield. Its core was the Bell 206 Jet Ranger, a civilian helicopter that first flew in January 1966 and quickly gained FAA certification as a safe, economical utility aircraft. When the Army needed a light observation helicopter, Bell offered this same airframe with few fundamental changes: a single Allison T63A700 turboshaft engine rated at 317 shaft horsepower, and a structure optimized for low weight and commercial cost. The original Kiowa entered service in 1969, but the bones never changed. It had one engine, minimal armor, and a fuselage built from thin aluminum and acrylic glass. The Kiowa's evolution was incremental. The OH-58C brought stronger rotor blades and a larger fuel tank, but the decisive change arrived with the OH-58D. This model introduced the mast-mounted sight, an advanced sensor pod perched above the rotor, designed and built by Sperry. The mast-mounted sight fused a forward-looking infrared camera, a laser rangefinder, and a television sensor, all feeding digital data to the cockpit. It was a leap in battlefield awareness, but it sat atop the same single-engine airframe, still lacking any meaningful ballistic protection. Every Kiowa Warrior that flew over Iraq or Afghanistan carried this contradiction: a sophisticated sensor suite and weapons pylon bolted onto a structure never intended to absorb enemy fire. The Army granted waivers for cockpit glass that failed to meet NATO ballistic standards, citing weight and cost limits as justification. The result was a platform whose survivability depended on staying unseen, not on withstanding a hit. That bargain, civilian economics dictating military risk, would come to define every hour the Kiowa spent in combat. Field Manual 13300 set the rules. It placed the Kiowa Warrior at the leading edge of the battlefield, but never in the crosshairs. The Kiowa would fly low using nap-of-the-earth tactics, masked by trees and terrain. Its mast-mounted sight, perched above the rotor, allowed the crew to scan for enemy armor while the helicopter itself stayed hidden. The idea was simple: see without being seen, designate targets for the Apache, then vanish before anyone could shoot back. The Apache, with its twin engines and heavy armor, was built to take the punishment. The Kiowa was not. It carried no meaningful ballistic protection, only thin aluminum skin and acrylic glass. Even after survivability packs and cockpit upgrades, the Army accepted waivers for glass that failed to meet NATO ballistic standards. Every assumption in the handoff doctrine depended on the Kiowa's ability to avoid fire, not survive it. The paired tactic was written into the manuals. The Kiowa would find and designate, the Apache would destroy. The handoff was supposed to happen in seconds, with the scout helicopter never lingering in the line of fire. In theory, the Kiowa's best defense was invisibility. Its sensor suite gave it reach, but its structure offered no margin for error. The Doctrine assumed open fields and distant threats, not the chaos of city streets or mountain valleys. As the battlefield changed, the platform's vulnerabilities would become impossible to ignore. Apache helicopters, built for heavy combat, looked ideal for city overwatch on paper, but their complex systems kept them grounded more often than not. Maintenance crews struggled with sensitive electronics, and climate-controlled hangars became a bottleneck. Quick redeployment was out of reach. In contrast, the Kiowa could be refueled and sent back up in minutes. Urban rules of engagement made the Apache's firepower almost unusable. Hellfire missiles and the 30mm cannon were off-limits near civilian buildings, their destructive range too risky for crowded neighborhoods. The Kiowa's lighter weapons, by comparison, were cleared for use where the Apache was not. It could hover low, scan rooftops, and respond instantly to troops in trouble below. Fatigue also played a role. Apache pilots, trained for high-speed attacks, found the constant low-level flying and rapid threat assessment exhausting. Kiowa crews, accustomed to flying close to the ground, handled the stress better. Over time, Army doctrine shifted. The Kiowa became the standard for urban overwatch, not because it was perfect, but because it was the only aircraft that could stay on station under the new rules. Each Kiowa Warrior in Iraq averaged 72 combat hours a month. In Afghanistan, the number climbed to 80. These are not training flights or administrative hops. They are logged hours in contested airspace, at altitudes that put the cockpit squarely inside the effective range of every AK-47 on the ground. The Army's own data shows a relentless tempo. Across both wars, the fleet accumulated over 820,000 combat hours by 2013. Every sortie meant another two-person crew exposed to ground fire, with nothing between them and a rifle round but a pane of thin acrylic or, at best, a lightweight laminate that never met NATO's ballistic standard. The Kiowa was designed to avoid detection, not to survive hits. Yet the mission demanded low, slow flight over rooftops and alleyways. The more hours the helicopters flew, the more predictable their patterns became, and the more crews found themselves inside the ballistic envelope of small arms fire. The statistics are clinical, but the implication is clear. The Army's operational needs turned a scout into a target. The human cost of this exposure would soon become impossible to ignore. Captain Kimberly Hampton's death on January 2, 2004, changed the way risk was measured in Army aviation. Hovering over Fallujah in her OH-58D, a single rifle round pierced the cockpit glass and struck her helmet. She died instantly, becoming the first female Army aviator killed by enemy fire. The investigation found no mystery. Ballistic protection had been waived, and the cockpit glass was never designed to stop the rifle fire common in Iraq. Within days, new risk memos circulated. Fly higher, pair with Apaches, avoid low hovers. Yet the missions continued, and the dangers remained. 3 years later, south of Baghdad, a Kiowa was shot down over the Tigris Canal. Both pilots survived the crash, but they were wounded and stranded in cold water. An Apache crew, unable to land, hovered close and strapped the injured pilots to their stub wings, flying them out above the canal. The story spread among pilots as a warning. Even perfect execution could end in disaster. Survival left to luck or another crew's nerve. Kiowa crews logged over 820,000 combat hours in Iraq and Afghanistan. Veteran Dan Berry-Ochoa summed up the reality. If there was oil leaking from the gearbox, you just wiped it down and kept flying. The cost of flying affordable machines was paid in lives. The search for a Kiowa Warrior replacement unfolded as a series of costly dead ends. The RAH-66 Comanche, begun in the early 1980s, burned through $6.9 billion before its cancellation in February 2004. Officially, shifting threats and the promise of unmanned systems were cited, but internal defense memos pointed to ballooning costs and requirements that never stopped moving. The Army's next answer, the Bell ARH-70, was meant to be quick and affordable, but by 2008 its price had doubled and the program was cancelled after $800 million was spent. The Armed Aerial Scout followed, pitched as a budget-friendly fix, yet a 2015 Government Accountability Office report found it would cost $4 billion more than simply upgrading the Kiowa. Each attempt ended the same way. The Army refused to pay for a safer option. Pressed by Congress, procurement officials pointed to hard numbers. Replacing Kiowas with Apaches for scout missions would have meant an extra $4 billion over 20 years, money the Army did not have under a $30 billion aviation cap. As one acquisition official wrote in 2013, given current fiscal constraints, the risk associated with continued OH-58D operations is acceptable. In 2017, as unmanned systems took over, the Army signed the Kiowa's retirement order. The final record was clear: cost, not capability, decided what stayed in the air. The Army logged over 2 million combat hours in a cockpit never meant to take fire, because fixing the procurement system cost more than risking its crews. Today, as drones inherit these missions, the calculus remains. Budget dictates vulnerability. Some lessons, it seems, are easier to bury than to correct.